Hi guys, Amy here with Amy's Wares, and today I have a video that is part 2 of the amazing August release at A Colorful Life Designs. In this video I'm going to finish some of the cards from the panels that I made previously, and that's what I'm showing you here. This August release at A Colorful Life Designs is amazing, and it's special because it has a stamp set, as you can see here. I have it all kind of pretty sped up because I don't want to, take all day. But I'm just showing you some of the techniques that I used to turn the panels in the first video into finished cards. So if you haven't checked out that first video, I will link it up in the top right corner if you want to start there. I'd recommend it because it shows you kind of many of the stencils in this release and kind of how to use them to create this awesome look. So go ahead and check that out. Otherwise, stick with me here and I'm going to show you some techniques to finish these cards, and at the end I'm going to show you, I think, something ridiculous like 15 finished cards or something like that. So hang with me and here we go. So on this one, these little panels that I cut into the one finished card panel, I realized were too wide for a standard A2 size. So I made a 5x7 card here, and a lot of what this video is just kind of pairing these panels with the brand new stamps. So as you can see, these sentiments work perfectly with these landscape stencils, and I love the fonts that Mary Kay chose, and they're just perfect. So I had fun kind of playing around with different locations on the cards and using the different panels and figuring out the best way to combine them. So if you haven't watched the first video, this is a massive collection of tree line edgers and mountain edgers and sea edgers and hills and basically anything you can imagine to create a scene. And these stencils are brilliant. They work so well together. They layer on top of each other. And in the first video, I kind of show you simple ways to create these scenes using dye inks. You can even create them with just one single color, which is what I did here. I did the ink blending with the Distress ink because I didn't want the layers to kind of sit on top of each other. I wanted them to sink into the paper. Now for the stamping, I wanted a more solid stamping for that sentiment, so I used the same color in the Distress Oxide. And as you may know, Distress Oxides are a hybrid, a mix of dye ink and pigment ink, and so in result they stamp a lot better. So of course you can ink blend with them, and they're water reactive, and they have a lot of the same components of the Distress dye inks, but they also stamp a lot better. So again, I used the Chip Sapphire Distress ink, dye ink, to do the ink blending to create that beautiful mountain scene, and then I used the same color, Chip Sapphire Distress Oxide ink, to stamp that sentiment. So I used a little stitched die and cut all those panels, and I used a adhesive backed foam and basically turned those into stickers. So I will have all the items used listed in the details if you expand that box below. I'll have all the links and information in there. And I also have a massive blog post where I'm going to detail all of these finished cards and close-up photos and all sorts of stuff like that. So I know I'm moving quickly here. I have it sped up pretty substantially, but it was so much footage and I had so much fun creating with this release, but it literally would have been way too long. So I kind of had to speed it up. So here you can see I'm using a different sentiment from the stamp set here. And I'm going to actually heat emboss it with some gold embossing powder just to kind of add to the warmth of the scene. These are the Canyon Edgers, which I felt worked really well with warm colors. Again, I used Distress inks to create this look. And I'm just using some clear VersaFine ink to kind of grab onto that embossing powder. And you'll see in a moment I'll dump that on there and then use my heat tool to cook it. Now, as I mentioned, this release not only is amazing because of all these landscape stencils, but this stamp set is a very new addition to A Colorful Life Designs. So I think she is planning on adding other sentiment stamp sets in future releases, but this is the first. So this is really exciting, and these are just so gorgeous and work so well with the stencils. I'm very excited to see what she comes up with. Mary Kay at A Colorful Life Designs has been just having a blast creating all these different designs to create landscapes, and I've been having just as much fun playing with them. She ended up creating more and sending them to me after the fact, so there's some I haven't even had a chance to play with yet, like the underwater ones and some hill ones and simple ground ones. But whether you use them like I did in these examples to make the landscape the focal point, or whether you use them as just a subtle, you know, grounding for a different focal point, like a critter or something like that, these are just so versatile. And then this one, I didn't like it up against the white, so I got some matte metallic gold cardstock here, and I have the basket weave stencil from a previous release, and I'm dry embossing the stencil to give some texture to that panel. So you can kind of see my sandwich here, but I actually have another video where I showcase that technique, so I'll link that up in the top right corner as well if you want to check that out after this. But it kind of shows you how you can use your stencils in yet another way. Can you tell I'm obsessed with stencils? But anyway, it'll show you how to use them to actually emboss them, kind of like an embossing folder. So many options here. Here I'm using some adhesive tape. I kind of just pull half the edge off, that way it's not totally stuck down if I mess it up when I'm lining it up. But I felt that that just gave it a little extra something, and it tied in the gold of the embossing really well. It was very closely matched to the gilded embossing powder from Brutus Monroe, so that worked out really well. And then just use some liquid glue and glue that down, and that finishes this card. So pretty. Okay, in this one, I used the tree line edgers and the cloud edger, which was from a previous release and was immensely popular. If you don't have the cloud edger, I definitely recommend it. It gives a much more natural cloud look, super easy to use. But I use those together in this and use that cool oval die cut just to kind of give it some interest. And here I'm futzing around with this thing for I don't even know how long. I don't even remember if I trimmed some of it out, but I was nervous I didn't have it straight, nervous it was going to shift on me. So you can see I just used some little acetate here to try and figure out and make sure. I didn't want the words to go over onto those little die cut holes, so finally I got it sorted. But again, same thing, I had used the Rustic Wilderness dye ink, the Distress ink, to do the ink blending, and now I'm using the Rustic Wilderness Distress Oxide to stamp the sentiment. So that way it matches the color, but then it has the consistency that you need, because you want that opaque, good stamping. Distress inks are amazing, but they're rubbish with stamping. You don't want to use them for stamping just because it'll be spotty. That's just kind of not how they're meant to be used. So use the Distress Oxide for stamping the sentiment, and Distress ink or any other dye ink in this case to kind of create that subtle ink blended look. So again, I use the adhesive backed foam to kind of create a big old sticker, and then just attach that to an already made A2 card base, and that is 110 pound cardstock Nina. So pretty simple, not much to it. I could have added some bling, but I don't know, I just kind of like the simplicity of it. Now this one I'm using my Paper Rose stitched edge dies here, and you'll see there's some serious oopsies on this one. I originally thought I was going to heat emboss again on the bottom. At first I thought silver, and then I thought white, and I got it lined up, and I wanted to make sure I stamped it. Now these stamps, just like any other clear ones, you see I'm rubbing my hand along. That's to condition the stamp. That's to get the coating from the manufacturer off of the stamp. If you don't do that, then your ink, it might not grab onto your ink the greatest at first. It's just kind of a way to condition your stamp. But anyway, I'm using the clear sticky ink again, the Versamark. Stamp it a few times, and I messed it up. I double stamped it. I think I just shifted it somehow. It wasn't the Misty's fault. Total user error, but I decided to pour powder on it just to see if I was right that I double stamped it, and alas, it was garbage. Thumbs down. Anyway, so trying to figure out what I'm going to do here. I grab out a little piece of black cardstock, think about maybe stamping a sentiment on that and popping it up, but that didn't really look right. Decided to cook it anyway with the heat tool just to see if by some chance it ended up looking okay, but it really didn't, so it had to go. So black cardstock, didn't like that. So I decided, okay, well, I'm going to cut this down. And honestly, this is not my forte. I see people using like little panels all the time, or kind of putting them in different spots on their card, and I feel like I struggle with those type of compositions. I love how they look, but I feel like I'm not very good at it. So this happy little accident, as Bob Ross would say, actually kind of inspired me to try and do this more often. So I busted out this Arrowhead Chevron stencil, again from a prior release. I love this stencil, and I'm legit winging it here. On all these cards, I honestly don't have any plans. This is kind of my process. I kind of just start grabbing stuff and seeing what works. So I use some Hickory Smoke Distress ink to kind of lay down some interest. This is directly on the card base, so this is another A2 card base, and I'm just kind of laying down some ink and moving this little panel around and figuring out. I decided to use different stamps because I realized the one originally wasn't as appropriate as this one. So anyway, I changed the stamp, kind of moving stuff around. I realized that was still actually a little bit too big, so I ended up using the next smaller size of the stitched rectangle die and made the little tree panel a little bit smaller. You can see there I got, ink all over the Misty door. I was Hot Mess Express here, seriously. I don't even know what was going on with me, but in the end, the card ended up one of my favorites, so I'm glad. So you can see I shrunk it down a little bit more, also because there was some embossing still on the bottom of it when it was bigger. So just kind of putting some foam tape on the back to pop it up, and then nestled it in, again, to a very kind of rando place on the card front, but I love it. I love how it turned out. So, again, happy little accident. So I have a cool, interesting edged die here. I'm just going to kind of bring down the size of the panel, figuring out where I want it, run it through my die cutter, and also run, again, you guessed it, some adhesive backed foam, just to kind of pop that up. And here I decided the background was a little bit plain again, so I used the dot circle stencil. This is pumice stone distress oxide. Again, no planning here, completely random. And after I finish this simple ink blending, I realize that I don't like it. Not a fan. So ditch that. I'll save that card base for something else. And then I grab the Buffalo Plaid stencil and kind of do the same thing, same color, pumice stone. I don't know why I picked distress oxide versus distress ink. I honestly don't know the rhyme or reason here. I think I just grabbed it because I was there. I'm not sure. But anyway, I just kind of did some loose ink blending around to give that card base some visual interest. And then, oh, I know why. It's because I decided I wanted to stamp the sentiment, again, using oxide, in a light gray. I didn't want the harshness of the black. I didn't want to do like a purple or blue. So that's why. That's what prompted that. So I used the same ink that I knew I was going to use for the sentiment to coordinate with the ink blending. See? No rhyme or reason. Just kind of playing as I go. So I'm just going to liquid glue that down to the adhesive backed foam. And then all that's left is just to kind of pop that up on the stenciled card base. That's really all there is to it. So that finishes another card. I'm going to show you at the end here, if you stick around, basically all the cards I've made so far from this collection. That one I used a grass edger, kind of in an unorthodox way, and made it look like a llama card. You see I made some of these panels, or showed some of these panels in the first video, so if you haven't checked that out, again, be sure to check out that first video. It really kind of shows you a lot of the stencils from this release. This was kind of the first batch that I made, and here's the one with that cool highlight that you'll see I talk about in the first video. I did some clear embossing over black stamping there. These are all the desert edgers, the two of those together. And here I just used it as a subtle background for my little cute fennec fox. And then, oh, this one. This is my favorite. I'm so pleased with how that turned out. Again, I did not plan that. It just kind of came to me as I went. And these are all the ones using the amazing new stamp set that I'm so excited about. And you saw me finish these today. So I hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to check out the rest of the release. There are a million stencils in this release, and there's a master collection bundle that is deeply discounted, 20% off. So check out the video details for more information, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.